On today's podcast, you're going to hear from Travis Davenport. And going into this interview, I wasn't sure what to expect, but I have to tell you that Travis probably has the best understanding and grip on how to create a positive culture and how to actually tap into creativity on demand, more so than anyone I've ever spoken with. Travis focuses on small businesses and works with small businesses. And of course, to have a mid-sized business and to have a big business, you usually start as a small business, but so many people get stuck. And Travis, during this interview, talks about ways he's worked with small businesses to help them grow 50 to 100% to get to that next level so they can then grow beyond that. But he does that by going back to the founder's origin story, working with that founder to create values, and those values result in the culture. And we always talk about building a corporate culture, but I think you're going to be really intrigued to hear how Travis sees it and how he practices it as a consultant with these firms that he works with, because he does it in a different way that's unique and pretty special. I know you're going to enjoy this. Today, I am really grateful that we have Travis Davenport on the podcast. Travis has actually got a book coming out so if you're listening to this in the summer, he's got a book coming out in the fall, which will be called Wolf&Iron: Why Your Personal Culture Matters in an Impersonal World. Great title. Also, he is the founder of Wolf&Iron, which he works with CEOs, established entrepreneurs to establish their personal architecture to align their company with themselves. But he's also got a second venture called Wolf&Iron Black Label, where he works with artists, musicians, and actors to have an on-demand and sustained creativity. So it's going to be cool. It's going to be a great discussion. We're going to talk about corporate culture. We're going to talk about the right things to do, some of the things we shouldn't do. And he's an expert in this field. So without further ado, Travis, welcome to the ThriveMore podcast. How are you doing?
Hey, Roger, I'm great, man. Thank you for having me on today. Such an honor to be having a discussion with you, your rich business history. In fact, I was going to say I was kind of brushing up on you a little bit over this last week. And man, that interview that you did with GSD concerning your gyms that you have, where you're kickboxing and you're punching, you're boxing and everything, man, just so cool to see small businesses thriving. And I love small businesses, just the heart and backbone of America. So thank you for all that you've done, how you've contributed to everything that we're talking about today.
Thank you. I appreciate that. This podcast is about you, not me, but I really, really appreciate that feedback. And I'm with you. Small business is the backbone of our country. You tap somebody on the shoulder on the street, and the average person doesn't realize that. They don't realize that, most fast food restaurants, most fitness studios, most clothing boutiques are all small businesses. Even if they're part of a chain, it's still locally, independently owned, and we need to support small business. That's part of the fabric of America. So thank you. I appreciate that. I enjoy doing those, and we've had a great success with that brand. So I'd love to just kind of jump right in and let the listeners understand what Wolf&Iron is. So let's just kind of start from the ground up. And why did you start it? What is it? And what is your mission?
Yeah, no, great questions. I appreciate that. I've been working in the nonprofit sector for well over 20 years, founded a number of nonprofit organizations with various missions, right? And so I've been, with nonprofit, it's literally that, nonprofit. So there's an immense amount of fundraising and relational currency that has to take place, between yourself, your community, your partners, and the teams that you raise up and the people that you influence, right? So I enjoy doing that because I really enjoy one-on-one relationships. So it was, I want to say probably 2014. That I was having a meeting with some of our team at that point in time, and we were really going through our culture, and we were really having a culture shift within our company. And I was leading through, teaching about culture. To be straightforward with you, the importance of it, the value of it, and we were about halfway through this process, really redefining what it was, taking inventory of who we are. What's the outward facing culture, the internal culture that we want to have as just employees and workers? And I had on my docket that afternoon, coffee with a small business owner who was happened to be a friend, and he had come into our office and he was outside on the couch, just kind of waiting for me to wrap up. And we had our door open, and I'm sitting there with, seven, eight of our team members. And apparently he was like listening, right? And so after that meeting, I went out to my office, and he came in. He said, "Hey, man, what would it take for you?" He owns a bunch of food trucks here in the local Columbus area. And he said, "What would it take for you to come down and talk about what you were talking about to my team?" And I said, "Oh man, let's go." I think it was within a couple of weeks I was down there talking to their team and their leaders. And then he asked me at the end, he's like, "Could you come back like next week and do this again and kind of talk through?" I was like, "Sure." I came back down, and and as an entrepreneur, you don't turn stuff down when you get the opportunity to talk in front of people. So
Sure.
I was in my zone. So enjoyed that. And then he came to me a third time and he goes, "Look, I'm going to be honest with you. We need to do a deep dive into this. Could I actually just pay you for what you're doing here? And could we put something down where it's a little more concrete?" And I was like, "Sure." So I went home and I gave one of my mentors a call and I was like, what do I do here? And he's like, you need to start like an LLC. You need to do this. You need to do this. You need to do this. And so I actually began working just with him, just really as a one-off. And I'm going to tell you the dynamic change that took place just in that company in 6 months. And then in a year, their profitability increased over 20%. The biggest one in terms of just their culture was their staff retention went from 40% to 98% in under a year. And so there's a very high turnover there.
Sure.
The winter season in Columbus is just horrendous. You know what I mean? And so it's difficult to keep people on. However, in that calendar year, they went, like I said, that staff retention was massive. And what I realized was, boy, culture matters. Culture matters because, there was all types of strategies and little things that we implemented, but the overwhelming king there was culture, and not just culture, but the correct culture. And so it was 2015 where I really decided like, hey, this is something that I really see massive value in and in building out. So took the better part of a year, developed an overall strategy, how it could be of use to small business owners, to CEOs, to established entrepreneurs, came up with a process that really walks a business owner, a founder, a CEO through who they are and aligning who they are with the actual culture, right? So one of the things that I've kind of found, and I'm sure that you've discovered this as well, we all have a personal culture, right?
Sure.
But the problem is we're not all intentional on what that culture is, much less do we know what our values are. And what I find is that values precede culture. People want to start with culture. They want to talk about what they want to, that's the fun part. You know what I mean? Here's what I want it to look like. Here's what I want my space to be like. I want, cereal for all my employees in the morning. I want like all these, those are all culture items and they're fun. But you could establish an incorrect culture that doesn't align with who you are. And because one of the things I say is you are your business. Yep. So the areas in your culture where you feel unfulfillment are just areas within yourself that you really, truly haven't defined. So we start with values. And I say values plus mission equals culture.
I like that.
If you get that backwards, the culture is going to drive the vision. Look, I love our employees. I love our team. But as a founder of an organization, I'm driving the vision.
Yep.
I'm driving the vision. Otherwise, it's just the loudest voice in the room.
I love that. Travis, if we can back up on values, we pride ourselves on having a values-driven organization. And I give a lot of credit to one of my business partners who really made that just a non-negotiable. And it makes, we always say it makes the decisions easy. The consequences can be hard, but it makes the decisions easy. When you're leading a CEO or a founder through a values exercise, which some people will, some authors are saying, it takes 2 to 3 years to really get your values right. It's not a sit down and do it in an hour. Although obviously you may have a much more efficient way of doing that. Kind of walk me through what that looks like with a CEO or a founder as you're trying to get first the values right before then you add the mission to come up with a culture.
Right. Great question, Roger. I would say there's a step before establishing values. In fact, I would say there's probably 2 steps. Number one, what I really like to start with, and this isn't nobody really likes to talk about this aspect of it because I'm an entrepreneur. I own a company, a couple companies, and I'm a business leader. However, I feel like I'm also a part-time therapist.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
so,
Sure.
and really that first session that we have, we're really going to hone in on the CEO or the client's origin story. Because our origin story, there's only so many origin stories. Origin stories are born out of one of five elements, right? Like rejection, betrayal, trauma, neglect, a couple other ones. And why that's important is because if I can discover what your origin story is, then I can really have a good understanding on your decision-making process as an adult. Most individuals have some type of unresolved origin story in their past that points them to who they are and really determines, by and large, a lot of who they become. I know there's like nature versus nurture. We get that, like our
Sure.
great leaders born, maybe, but our great leaders nurtured? Yes, definitely, right?
For sure.
And so it's like this is the corniest word I could come up with. But what I'm trying to do is do a super nurtural experience, a super nurtural experience. Because if I can pull that out, now I can point and ask the question, hey, is your decision process that you make now, is it serving you? Is it serving you best? And if the answer is no, then what we need to do is really go back to the beginning, figure out why you make decisions the way that you make them, resolve what's going on in the past, because, whatever we don't get as a child, and this is like the therapist side of it,
Yeah.
whatever we don't get as a child, we seek out as an adult. But one of my friends and mentors, Brian Boucher, he's great, wrote a book called The Purpose Factor, phenomenal book. He
Okay.
says it like this: when we heal what's been injured as a child, we actually seek to give what was never given to us as a child. I love that.
Yeah.
Because now, if as a child I didn't receive, and this feels like soft metrics, but I'm telling you, it is bedrock important. It is foundationally important. Because if I, was not raised in a two-parent home and I sought the love of my father and I was rejected by that, now I'm going to carry that into new relationships and new opportunities, this fear of being rejected. So it's going to hold me back at times. If we heal that, imagine what takes place there. So really, number one, long answer, but
No,
the short answer
this
for
is
the long
great,
answer,
Travis. This is great stuff. Yeah.
the real answer is we map out your origin story. And there's a way that I do that specifically. Sometimes, to be honest with you, it gets very emotional.
Mm-hmm.
We're digging into things that people haven't dug in. But I would say the most success I've seen with CEOs is to the depth of their openness that they give. A lot of times we're signing NDAs. I mean, a lot of times we're signing things where we're like, don't share this with anybody. And I'm like, I got it, right?
Yeah.
But to the depth of their honesty, right? The depth of their honesty is the depth to which the values that we create will be true and authentic. So that's step one. That's session one. That's session one,
Okay.
maybe session two as well.
Yeah.
And then we move on. Then we move on to the next step, which is I call it's we're mining your genius. We're genius mining. I'm under the assumption that most everybody is a genius. I know that sounds ridiculous, but there was a study done by Harvard a number of years ago where they were trying to determine where genius came from and how to qualify or quantify geniuses. And they found out when they pulled children under the age of 7 that 98% of them tested creatively at a genius level.
Wow.
They pulled those same children at age 10 and it was down to 30%. They pulled those same children at age 17 and it was down to 3%. So something shifts between our young age where creatively we go from abstract to concrete, and we lose something there in terms of how we receive the world and how we actually put ourselves out there into the world. So I want to go back to when you're still a genius, mine out that genius and apply it to today. So that's the process that we do. And really, to be honest with you, there's a process there. It's a simple process. It's a complex process, but it's also simple. And we wiggle it down to 4 or 5 values. And what I say is, if you want fulfillment, and fulfillment is different for everybody. Success is different for everybody, right? I'm the most successful man I know. I've been married for almost 20 years. I have 5 kids. We meant to have 3 of them. The last 2 were twins and they popped out. We were shocked, but we meant to have 3. But I have friends. I have a great family. I get to do what I love on a consistent. I am the most successful person that I know by my own terms. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
But here's the thing. I also function within my box. I stay in my lane. In other words, because I want fulfillment, I don't do anything outside of my values, even if it's very lucrative. I turn down things more than I say yes to them. I get out, I stay away, I should say, from toxicity more than I enter into drama because I know what my values are. And now the challenge just becomes living out of my values. So I think of values as a filter. I love coffee. I
Hmm.
love coffee, but a filter makes or breaks your coffee, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Right. It makes a good cup of coffee.
yeah.
You don't have a filter. It's a pretty gritty, bit of
Sure.
coffee. Right. So I think of values as the filter that you run everything through. And now, if you want fulfillment, you function within your values. If you want satisfaction, you function within your values. So values are internal, and it's the lens through which we see the world and perceive and work in the world.
I love that filter analogy. I've never heard it put that way, but that's you said earlier. It's a complex process, but I make it simple. And I think some of the most complex, abstract things we can go through when they're said in a very simple way helps us digest them. And I love that. That's a great analogy. Yeah.
But once you really map out the origin story, once you really determine the values, then the rest is just cake. I mean, it's just butter, man. It just rolls. The mission rolls. The culture then is, and I would say this, a lot of people have written so many books about culture and so many fantastic ones out there. But I see culture in the same way that I see love, right? I love my wife. That's a commitment.
Yep.
So oftentimes people are like, I fell out of love. I don't feel that feeling. What do I do? And I'll say, like, you need to love your wife. No, you didn't hear me. I don't feel like I love her anymore. I'm like, what do feelings have to do with it? Like the
Sure.
feeling of love, is a byproduct of the action of love. Culture is the byproduct of correct owner values. So if you want a good culture, you need to become a healthy founder. If you want a healthy culture, you have to be a value driven entrepreneur, CEO. So the more healthy we can become in determining our values, man, the greater the culture will align to who we are. I have this saying all the time. I think I've already said it once. You are your business. You are your business. So the areas that you don't like inside of your business are just a reflection of the areas that are unresolved or undisciplined within yourself as an owner.
Wow. I mean, I'm just sitting back thinking about that. My next thought on that is, okay, so you are your business, but then how have you seen the most successful way to scale? Because most entrepreneurs' goal is to scale their business. And I don't believe in the thing of, I want to never work in my business. I only want to work on it. Show me that business. I don't know where that business exists. Like at some point you
Yeah.
have to work in your business, right? To make sure that
Yeah.
that things are being taken care of. I understand the concept, but certainly business is like a garden and needs to be tended to. But
Mm-hmm.
as you scale it, that's where I've seen it. I've been part of scale ups from, zero in revenue to 1.2 billion. Certainly not all my doing by any means, but I've been part of that ride. I've been part of starting, my own businesses with partners and scaling those businesses. But when you get on those crazy rocket ships where you're going to 9 and 10 figures, you're bringing on a lot of people. Like the only
Mm-hmm.
way to get those kind of returns are you're hiring a lot of people.
Right.
And it's at that point is where I've seen, at least in my experience, is you start to lose the culture because it gets diluted by all these. And so, what is the key to that? What has been your experience in helping to keep those values, keep that culture as that entrepreneur grows and scales?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's a question that every owner should consider. If you're not considering those questions, you're really limiting yourself to you're not going to stretch beyond your own bubble, right? And maybe some people are okay by that. Maybe
Sure.
maybe some people are all right with that. But when you're talking about very driven individuals who really want to succeed in a different way, those are questions that we really need to take time to consider. And so I think there's a couple key benchmarks of shift which have to happen inside of a company. Things evolve. Companies evolve and have to change, and the dynamics internally have to shift and change. And I think this is one of the challenges why a lot of companies hit this ceiling. John Maxwell calls it the law of the lid, right? We keep hitting that lid. Well, look, I am only so much as a leader, right? He says like, hey, if you're an 8, focus on becoming a 10 in this area. Well, if I'm an 8 financially, I'm a financial guru, I'm great with numbers, but I'm horrible with people. He would say, focus on the financials. But my question is, well, should I have horrible personal skills with people then? Like I'm going to be hurting internally. And so we shift to this mindset of delegation. Delegation's great. However, there has to be a shift, I think, Roger, there has to be a shift in the type of delegation, or maybe even the mindset behind delegation. What I mean by that is this. A number of years ago, I worked with a CEO of a landscaping business, quite successful in terms of local terms, wanted to scale his business to break over $2 million. He started off with a wheelbarrow and a rake and a mower. That's the kind of thing, and had tremendous local success, really. Had broken through $1 million, but was really hovering around that 1.2, 1.3, which seems to be kind of that avenue, right? Sometimes he'd bump under $1 million. Sometimes it's a good year, 1.3. He's like, how do I break through that? He's like, I've hired good crew. I've got good managers. And I was like, well, let's have a discussion. We walked through his value. We mapped out his origin story, all those things. And then I started having conversations with some of his managers, and I realized something really quick. All of his managers are exactly like him. All of them talk like him. All of them dress like him. All of them walk and work like him, the personal interactions. Now, here's the thing. If you want to hover between a $1 to $2 million company, that's how you do it.
Yeah.
That is how you do it. However, and he did a great job delegating. And his idea was, I am replicating myself into my leaders, which is what we're taught, right?
Sure,
I do, you watch. I do, you help. I do, you help. You do, I watch. You do with somebody else. And the goal is, because I can't be 2 places at once, I'm going to clone myself into someone else, right? The problem is that doesn't work when you begin to scale at massive size. So once again, I come back to you, Roger, honestly, is culture. And really what I come back to is values. It has to begin with your values. When you have aligned your values correctly and you have a correct culture, your culture should be accepting of people who are not like you, but are willing to carry out the same values. Look, I don't want a clone of myself, but I do want you to operate in the same values. If you are operating in a business sense out of my same values, the company value, because my values are a company's values, because I am my business. So what happens is in terms of hiring, and to be honest with you, firing, look at it like this. If I've got 2 fish bowls, fish water tanks, one is a saltwater tank, one is a freshwater tank. Both of them have very determined, very defined cultures. One's saltwater, one's freshwater. If I take a freshwater fish and I put it in fresh water, it's going to flourish. It's going to do great. If I put another one in there, they might even multiply and have a bunch of fish babies. But if I take that same fish and put it into the saltwater tank, it's going to die.
Yeah.
It's going to seek to remove itself out. Why? Because it's the right fish in the wrong culture. And so what I have to do as an owner is build a culture so strong that when I delegate the task, the leader is going to be implementing the strategy out of my and our company's values and culture, but from his own unique expertise.
Yeah.
And that's where you cannot become, in my opinion, you can't become so heavy-handed as an owner, task-oriented, where you're like, do it this way, do it this way. You don't know. You might have just brought on the person who innovates a new way to do the task. And look, if you innovate a way to get a task done in my set of values that we have as a company, bravo, I have made a good hire, and I have brought on somebody who now has ownership in the company, feels actual authentic leadership, and can stretch and grow. If I just replicate or duplicate myself into somebody, I've just cloned people, and now they will never be able to achieve more than I'm able to achieve, which therefore means I have massively limited the scale of opportunity. And what happens is people freak out. And they're like, well, I'm just going to hire people. Who's this guy? Who's this guy? They've got the degree, they've got the expertise, and they bring them in, and they're not a culture match.
Yep.
They're not a value match. And so it's a conversation. It takes more time.
Sure.
It does. And when you're trying to scale quickly, but I would say there's an easy way to go about it. If you front load it correctly at the beginning, then you have an easy on-ramp to scalability that is going to allow you to properly delegate. There's a benchmark where the delegation type shifts is what I would say.
Travis, what would you say has been your experience in when you've actually been able to get, like, do you see the light bulb go off? Because, hey, entrepreneurship is incredibly hard, which means it takes a little bit of an ego. You've got to be a little bit egotistical to think, I can do this better than anybody else. That's why I'm getting into business.
Yeah.
Which means that you have to get them past that ego. And when do you notice most that light bulb switches, or I'm not saying that, it's probably not a magic phrase. Every person is different, but maybe give me an example of when you were talking with somebody and you could see that switch and they permanently made that switch.
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say session 1 is a make or break session, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, session 1, because really, and I've said this at times, I think about relationships, right? And I think about them in terms of banks. Okay. So, Roger, I barely know you. I only know you from what I've seen online, our brief interactions online. But let's say we struck up a relationship where there's a friendship. We talk on the phone. We go golf when I'm down in Charlotte, whatever it is, right? And what I'm doing now is I'm making deposits into the bank of Roger. Yep. I'm making relational deposits into your bank. Now, let's say that we have a tee time for 7 a.m. and I show up at 7:30 and you give me a hard time. You're like, Travis, tee time is 7 a.m. Oh, I'm sorry. I got stuck in traffic or whatever. What did I just do there? I didn't make a deposit. I made a withdrawal.
Yeah.
Now, the problem is a lot of people make withdrawals on relationships that they don't have enough relational currency and relational equity, right? And so my goal is to really build relational equity, build relational currency, deposit, because I am intentionally going to make some very strong withdrawals at some point. And so early on, some of the mistakes I made was I was making some big withdrawals, but I quickly found out I did not have the currency to be pulling out, right?
You were overdrafted.
So I would say, yeah. And I'm bankrupt. And then when you're bankrupt with somebody, you gotta pay just to get to neutral, right?
Sure.
And so I think this is a transferable approach between my kids, my wife, my friends, my family. I want to be constantly making deposits, relational currency. So I would say, I think it partially has to go into the frame of relational currency. Session 1, if I have enough relational currency built up with a CEO or an entrepreneur or an artist or a musician, I'm going to immediately make a withdrawal. And the way I'm going to say it, and there are variations between the way that I say it, but I'll say something, and the base is this. I don't care what you've done to this point, because what you've done to this point clearly isn't working, or I wouldn't be sitting here.
Yep. Oof.
Now, sometimes that's a $25 withdrawal. Sometimes that's about $100,000 withdrawal. So if it's going to be that strong, I got to make sure I got about $250K in the bank to be able to withdraw that. Yeah. When you make the mistake of making withdrawal, you see it instantly. It's over. It's done. You have lost credibility. You have spoken out of line. But when you speak it correctly and you have properly gauged that relational currency and you say, look, I don't care what you've done, and you say it in a softer way, clearly. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but when you say it correctly and convey in a correct way, a light bulb does go off. Hey, he's right. If I knew what I was doing here, or if I knew how to fix this, I wouldn't have paid this guy to sit in front of me and talk to me. And here's the deal. I don't have to know I don't have to know how to run your business. I don't know. I don't know how to run food trucks. I don't know what goes into the degreasers and how to make a pita or how to sell a cheeseburger. I don't know how to do that stuff. But here's the catch. I don't need to. I'm not looking to become an expert. I know the things that work, and I know how to affect internally you and help you discover who you are and your values. And that is transferable across everything, whether it's government, whether it's a home, whether it's a business, whether it's a nonprofit sector. There's a transferable principle that is equal to all those things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
A light bulb moment goes off there, but I would say the guts, the meat of this process really the light bulb goes off when we go through these phrases and words, this process that I use, and really mine out their genius. That's when you can see, oh, wow. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Oh my gosh. Wow. And because what you're doing is you are giving a definition to the person, maybe a person you barely know, and you're
Yeah.
defining them better to them than they
Mm.
could even define themselves to you.
Wow. That's powerful.
And it's fun.
God forbid you actually enjoy what you do. I love that.
Yeah, I love seeing the transformation. I love seeing the transformation. Oftentimes because I'll stay on retainer with some of our companies for 3 to 6 months, and it's wild. I mean, just the personal stories that happen outside of the business. I mean, just personal stuff where people's marriages
Yeah.
have completely changed as a result of this. How they have struck up a new relationship with one of their children who's moved out, who's an adult now, and they're saying like, "Man, I started running my life through these values, and it's it's transformative. It's transformed
Wow.
everything." Those are the ones for me, beyond money, beyond whatever. Those are the ones for me where I'm like, man, that is so fulfilling.
Is it because they're not intentional? Like, why do most owners, if you had to sum it up, why do they get culture wrong? Because there's probably less great places to work than there are great places to work when you really get down to it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, why is that? Where is the whiff?
Yeah. I mean, I would say it's a copycat syndrome. We
Mm,
want it cheap and easy. We want it quick and fast. I mean, let's be honest. We live in a quick and fast culture, right?
sure.
I mean, I can throw up something on TikTok, on my Instagram, on whatever, and I can get a bajillion likes on it today, and then tomorrow, nobody cares.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
fact, tomorrow, I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care,
Yeah.
right? Because we have a quick and easy, and we view culture as an addition, right? We view it as something that we don't authentically realize we need. We see it as just maybe pleasing our customers or something we have to do to keep people around. That's not what culture is. Culture is the actual culture is the actual I mean it eats strategy for lunch. Culture
Yeah.
does. Culture fills in the gaps of your failures. You
Yep.
can have an incredibly strong culture and a healthy culture, right? A value driven culture. And if you have that in place, as a CEO, as an owner, you can fail your employees and they will still love you.
Yeah.
They will support you. And they will say things like, "It's okay, boss. We'll get them next time." If you have a poorly defined culture, if you have a non-authentic culture, authenticity is key there. If it's not authentic, right?
Yep.
What happens is you fail your employees and they're on Indeed. They're looking around, where can I go? And so we have a
Sure.
copycat syndrome. We're like, well, what's Google doing? What's Apple doing? Oh, they've got a lunchroom.
Yep.
Oh, they've got swing sets. Oh, they're bringing in concerts. And so we're like, well, I'm going to bring in a concert. Number one, you bring something in like that where you've never done anything. Your employees are going to be sitting around scratching their heads like, what the heck is this, man? I would have
Sure.
rather you gave me a $250 gas card than spent, $200,000 bringing, like whoever, Luke Bryant or something,
Sure.
like, what are you doing?
Yep.
So I think it's copycat syndrome. I don't think we give enough time to it. I don't think we consider it enough. I don't think we see the value behind it.
Yeah.
But once you
Yeah.
connect the dots and say, hey, look, here's what other companies have done. Here's where they implemented a correct culture. Here's the bottom line. Then all of a sudden, you really start stimulating. I mean, it costs what? 1.25, 1.5 times the amount to replace an employee that it takes to pay
Oh,
an
yeah.
employee. Yeah, right.
Easily. Yeah.
So once you say that and say, hey, this will drastically change your staff retention. Well, okay, what's the bottom line? The bottom line is you're going to spend way less money and make way more money. And then all of a sudden
Yeah.
somebody's like, okay, so even if they're not authentic as a CEO, we can get to a place of authenticity where it's like, I want to make more money. I want to do better. How do I do that? And then it's once again the therapy mode,
Yeah.
entrepreneurial therapy, where you're
Yeah.
just wiggling down in. So
Yeah. Well, I'd love to just pivot to probably similar discussion, but you have this second wing to your business, if you will, Wolf&Iron Black Label, right?
yeah,
And it's for artists, musicians, actors. I'm going to take a wild guess here because we didn't talk about this before we got on air. That you must have a special passion for that yourself, or that wouldn't be part of your journey. So just talk to me about that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I love writing songs for my wife and for my kids. I play guitar, piano, drums. Not very good, but I enjoy it, right?
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
and so really, I would say beyond music, what I'm intrigued by creativity.
Mm,
Creativity. I'm intrigued by it, and creativity is a fickle beast.
yeah.
I think that a number of years ago, really started seeing how creativity can be leveraged when it seems like creativity isn't needed. Um, the very thing that is needed actually is creativity. And if you're talking about a very static company, and static and creatively static, you think about, I'm working right, I've got a couple clients right now that are chiropractors, just
Hmm.
local, right? And there's not real, there's not a strong need. Nobody's in the chiropractic space saying, you know what we need? We need creativity. No, nobody's really
Sure,
saying that, right?
sure.
No, nobody's in the landscaping business or the dentistry. Work with a clinic, a dentistry clinic. The last thing they're saying is, how do we get creative on this? You know what I mean? But the fact of the matter is, if you want to be innovative, you must find out how to leverage creativity. You know,
Mm.
um, Innovation comes when you have a lack of resources and a lack of knowledge, right, or a lack of understanding in something. So you are, I hate to say this, but it's true. You're dumb enough to try
Love it.
whatever, right?
For sure, for sure.
And then sometimes, if you have the resources to do it, sometimes you'll land on something that nobody has come up with before and do it in an intriguing way. Now everybody wants to do it that way, but it takes an immense amount of creativity to do it right. So how it gets into the musician, actor, artist space, and this is why it's a completely different thing. It's value driven
Yeah.
creativity.
Okay.
It's value driven creativity. And so what we provide, what Black Label really offers is this question. What would it be like if you could have on demand creativity? At any point in time, you can call up creativity. What would it be like for that creativity to be sustained for as little or as long as you'd like? How much value would that add? Right now, I'm working, I won't name him, I'm working with a multiple Grammy Award winner producer. He's genius. He's genius. He's crazy. He's in a good way.
When he
And
got
he
tested
told
at
me,
17, he was part of that 3%. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And his thing is, he's in between albums right now. He's getting ready to jump onto a now album, and he's like, man, I need to get creative. I don't feel like I'm in a slump, but I don't feel like I'm in my zone. How can I do
Mm.
that? And so we started walking through Black Label, this process, and took him through. Once again, it starts with mapping out his origin story. And then, how I explain it to him, and it seemed like it really resonated, and with other artists that I've worked with as well. Creativity happens in bursts,
Yeah.
right? There's this burst of creativity. That's why an artist and musician is always carrying around an iPad or a notebook, because you never know when it's going to strike. You might be flying over, the country, and you look out and you see a lake and you're like, I got to write that down, right?
Yeah.
So creativity comes in these big bursts and followed by a long degree of grind, wait, and fear.
Mm.
What if I don't get in that zone again? And that's all anxiety. And that doesn't
Yeah.
help creativity.
Nope.
Creativity is not born out of anxiety, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we want to go from having these bursts of creativity followed by these long periods of downtime. Rather, we want to have these elongated moments of creativity followed by scheduled downtime, choosing to go into it at will. And boy, I got to tell you, it works well. It's phenomenal. And to a musician, to an artist, to an actor, to a teacher,
Yeah.
to a creator, any type of creator who's looking to say, I've only got so much time, and when I sit down to be in the zone, I need to call it in. Then this process works fundamentally well. Fundamentally well.
Are you using some type of trigger that teaching them some way to get into that state? Like, just speak a little bit
Yeah.
more to that if you could.
Yeah, to a degree. Once again, everything starts with our origin story, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of it, to be straightforward with you, has to do with a lot of gratitude. Uh, looking at the things that have taken place in our life. I like to say it like this. It's a perspective change. I've heard somebody say it, a French philosopher back in the day. I don't know his name. I can't remember. I wouldn't be able to pronounce it anyway. But he said it like this: we are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. I love that, because really we need to start back before nurture began. I want to know the nature. I want to know the nature genius before your father betrayed you, before you were bullied, before all these things. But then I want to move into, what did it make you feel like when your father was this? What did it feel like in that bully moment? What did it feel like when you took home that Grammy? What did it feel like to fall in love? What would it feel like to be divorced? And all those things pour into the river of us and empty out into the ocean of how we behave. And so what I seek to do is to dam up those tributaries, those pivotal moments in our life that have helped define us, and turn them into wells of immense creativity that we can visit at any point or time. And here's the key, because that sounds horrible. Why would I want to revisit my divorce? That was the most atrocious moment of my life.
Sure.
No. You visit those points after you've gotten gratitude from those points. Case in point, here's an example. Working with an artist right now who, very difficult season, won't get into it, but very difficult, traumatic event that happened in his life. Somebody stole a lot from him as a young man. And so we're walking through it, and I said, what did he take from you? He listed out what he took. And then I turned around and asked him, I said, what did he give you? And he said, what do you mean? He didn't give me anything. And I said, well, he's your dad. What did he give you? Well, he gave me life. He gave you life. What else did he give you? I don't know. He was running drugs. He was never home. Oh, so he's a hustler. Yeah. Where do you think you learned to hustle? Probably him. Yeah. So he gave you an entrepreneurial spirit. What else? And by the end of it, we had listed out 10 different things. And I turned around and asked him the question. Now, let me ask you a question. Do you think your dad took more from you or gave more to you? Gosh, gave more to me. Yeah. And so that's gratitude. Gratitude, one of the most underwhelming tools in our box. People don't use it. They think, I asked you about gratitude, I believe, earlier on in the conversation, because I always want to know what's your practice with gratitude. What do you do? How do you get that out every day? Because it is one of the most underutilized resources in our toolbox that we have. Gratitude helps heal trauma, and then allows that trauma to become a well of creativity that we can visit, experience those emotions, have power over them, then channel them into something where we can call up creativity at any moment.
Wow. I was suddenly deep, but it's just profound the way you've framed it. I've learned to practice gratitude too late in life. But I'm incredibly grateful to my wife for really helping me, appreciate what we have, not what I'm striving for. But just the way you ran that through a filter, that helped me. So thank you for that. That was
no
really,
problem.
really cool. Yeah.
It's always challenging because as entrepreneurs or creatives, whether we're on Wolf&Iron, just classic CEO, founder, entrepreneur, or if we're on Wolf&Iron Black Label, the same is true. All those individuals, I'm guessing you to a degree, myself for sure, we all live in tomorrow. Yeah. I have to be optimistic about tomorrow, because if tomorrow is not optimistic, then my dreams die.
Yeah.
But my wife has helped me in a similar way, because she doesn't live in tomorrow. And I mean this respectfully. She lives in today, because guess what? Today, our lawnmower needs fixed. Yeah. Today, we need to go take the dog to the kennel. Today. And look, my thing is like, I don't have time for today. Sure. I don't have time for today. I'm living in tomorrow, baby. I got to get to tomorrow. I got to do this. She's like, well, somebody's got to do this today. Sure, and it ain't going to be me. You know what I'm saying? And so really it's finding that healthy balance of living in tomorrow while being acutely aware of what needs to take place today.
Sure. Absolutely. With the time we have left, I'd love to, and I'm going to ask you a few questions at the end, just some standard kind of fun questions, but I'd love to better understand. I'm sure the listeners would love to better understand your origin story, because you talk like a psychologist, like a trained psychologist, the way, and I think that half the audience is going to run towards this type of self-discovery, and maybe the other half that you've scared the hell out of them, quite frankly.
Yeah, probably so.
Yeah, because these questions are real. These are real questions that so many of us will not want to confront. And it's just easier to not confront them because they're
Right.
scary questions. They're
Right.
powerful questions. They're questions that need to be answered, by ourselves. But you've mastered this topic. I would love to understand your origin story and how you got here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would say to answer, there was a question I think inside of that question, or maybe it's a self-imposed question. But I mean, for me, you know, when you don't examine these questions, when you don't ask these questions, you are limiting yourself. You're
Yeah.
limiting your potential. And I think people have a funny way of looking at potential. Uh, Potential is powerful, but also potential is pointless.
Yeah.
In this case, right? I've got a bunch of trees outside my house. If I pick up an acorn and I hold it there, there's the potential there for an entire forest, a potential for a massive ecosystem there with birds and squirrels and animals and diverse plant life. There's all contained inside that potential. But if I hold this acorn in my hand and I never plant it, that potential is pointless. It's done nothing. So oftentimes I see people holding their potential, thinking that that acorn is going to sprout through their hand and grow a forest. And so, no, it's not going to happen. You got to dig. And the deeper you dig, the better you plant, the better you care for, water, and nurture that seed in the ground, the more we're going to see that potential actually come to fruition. So we got to ask these tough questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Otherwise, we're going to be limiting ourselves, right?
For sure.
Um, I would say a couple things in terms of my origin story.
Yeah.
I was raised in a home, two-parent home, loving parents. My grandfather, one of my best friends growing up, passed away a couple years ago at the age of 92.
Wow.
I really got a lot of my entrepreneurial spirit from him. He was off in the Korean War, came back, married my grandma, and he was a diesel mechanic in the war, came back and thought, shoot, I might as well be a diesel mechanic here in America. He's from
Yeah.
West Virginia, so they know how to get things done with duct tape. It was great. And so, and so he started a bus company where he was just servicing buses. My parents met in a touring, believe this or not, a touring singing group. They were in this quartet and they toured the company, and then they cut a couple albums. You've never heard of them, believe me.
Sure.
And my grandfather said, well, hey, if they're going to be getting married, then I might as well be the one driving the bus around because I got the bus. Sold his company, bought a quality bus. And it's the equivalent of the family band, toured the company. And I was born up into that. So all I knew at a very young age was my family and hustle and grind. And to make those to get those venues, you got to hustle. To meet those things, you got to have good people skills. You got to talk to people. My father was a pastor. He still is a pastor to this day. And the amount of counseling and nurturing that goes into real relational currency there is a must. Otherwise, you don't have a job, right?
Yeah.
And so I learned a lot. I learned a lot from watching my grandfather. I learned a lot from watching my father, learned a lot from watching my mother, how they interact with people, generosity, caring for people who have no ability to give anything back to you, right? A calling to a greater purpose there, I would say. And so I'm not saying I'm a selfless individual. I'd love to be more selfless than I am. That's something that I work on every day. But I think there is a type of quality of life that emerges when you begin saying, how can I serve you? How can I honor you? There's a fair amount of selling that I have to do, in terms of as an entrepreneur. And what I've found, and I'm not the first one to find this, and in fact, I don't know that I've invented or created anything on my own. I just mix and match and steal and develop, and over time it becomes my own. But what I've found is people buy from people they like. People buy things. You're going to buy it. You're going to buy this from somebody. Okay. So why not me? Well, often the often the blockade is they don't like me. And if you don't like me, you ain't going to buy from me. Right.
Sure.
And so the deal is to authentically be in a place where you're trying to serve people. Hey, I want to serve you beyond this business. I want to serve you as a human. I want to serve you as a person. I want to serve you as a father. I want to serve you as a friend. I want to serve you as a confidant, whatever that is, as a consultant, whatever avenue I want to serve you. Some industries pay more for that. Other industries pay none.
Yeah.
None. However, taking opportunities, when I find people who I at least have values that align with mine, or the potential, I see the potential that their future values could align with mine. I want to work with them. I want to spend time with them. I want to foster. I want to leverage what I've learned and help them in their endeavors, whether that's in the nonprofit. We work right now with a local nonprofit who builds beds for children who do not have any beds. It's massive in Columbus. Bed Brigade. They're massive. And we go down there at once every couple months, and we will build beds and we go deliver them to homes. These children have nothing to give you.
Yeah.
Nothing. They don't even have a bed, right? And so, but the fact is, it's so fulfilling to give with no expectation of getting something back. And so, quite honestly, I might be able to go further faster if I didn't function that way. But the journey is so much more enjoyable with this. Part of the reason we call it Wolf and Iron is I'm under the assumption that every single human being needs a wolf pack. You need a pack of people around you that challenge you, that bite you in the you know what when you're not doing your best, that push you. But you also need iron. Iron, when you sharpen against iron, makes both the blades better.
Yep.
So I don't want to be sharpening myself against plastic. I'm going to get dull. I need strong individuals in my life. So it's really that combination of wolf and iron that we can really, I think, see the human potential come out and see somebody living in true fulfillment.
Travis, I appreciated everything you've said. Just so grateful to have spent this time with you. Just 3 questions. And this is just a little lighter, a little more fun, just so that kind of get to know you. One, I want to know your favorite book, and it can't be a religious text because that's a gimme, right? So non-religious text. And then love to know your favorite movie, but why, and really why it made an impact on you. And then I'll ask you one last question. So let's just start with like your favorite book, and most importantly is, how has it impacted your life?
Yeah, man, oh gosh, I am a reader, and I got to give a caveat. I'm really thankful for Audible, because that's how I read my books.
Yeah, sure.
It counts as reading, right?
For sure.
I'm trying to ingest 5 to 6 books a month through Audible, right? So there are so many great books on the market right now. In the past, I mean, Think and Grow Rich is a massive book that everybody, how to win friends and influence people. Gosh, so massive. And then I would even say, from the creative aspect, I mean, I love things like Lord of the Rings. I know it might make me sound a little nerdy, but I love the writing of Tolkien. I love C.S. Lewis, right? But I would say, for me, in terms of books, one that I have really enjoyed lately, I mean, that has brought an immense amount of value. It's not my top book. It's only 99 cents. It's the book by Alex Hormozi, where he talks about, $100 million offers. Is that what it's called? Oh my gosh, man. Every single page. And this is recent. This is in the last couple of years I've read this. And I have used that as a textbook. So in terms of usability, I would say that is a book that I refer to all the time. And it was cheap, so I bought it because the dude's buff and he's got a beard. And so I was like, I'm reading this, you know what I mean? That book has impacted me massively in the short term. And then I would say a book that I refer to often, I mentioned John Maxwell, his Laws of Leadership book is Bible. Bible. In term, that is a must read for all of our employees, whether it's you to ascribe of those tenets spiritually or not. They're so transferable that it is referred to often, I would say, in my case. So I would say Laws of Leadership, that's probably the biggest one for me. But that Hormozi, man, he's got me on that book. It's powerful.
I've recommended that book to so many people, and I've actually I've followed him. I've used him as a consultant in the past, believe it or not, because of the specific industry we're in. But what I've learned from him is he takes his reading level down to a 3rd grade level. He literally runs it through a filter so that every page is just gold, because there's no filler. There's zero filler. And I think so many of us that write and so many of us that create, we try to make something simple very complex, and he's done the complete opposite, which has worked. Yeah. If you had to pick, and again, it doesn't have to be, anything crazy, but is there a movie as you were growing up, or is there a movie that just impacted you, and why?
Yeah. I mean, I've got so many movies I like, right? That stretch across a bunch of ridiculous genres. I would say though, can I say two?
Sure.
Okay. Number one, Braveheart. It just is.
Yeah.
For so many reasons, man.
Yeah.
I here's a guy with vision, with conviction, and with a mission. And those three things, that passion that comes out of vision and mission, and just saying like, I know what's right and I'm willing to give my life for what's right. For me, that resonated. I know it's out of Scotland, but for me, that goes back to, I have such a respect for the founders of our company, the founders of our country, rather. Living with that same type of conviction. We know what's like. We know what it's like. We know what the vision is. We're willing to give our lives for it. I feel like there is such a lack of internal conviction today among so many individuals. And I think that's just because they don't know. They don't know maybe what it's like to act on that conviction, right? But I love that movie for that reason. I love that he goes out and he's trying to save his girl. I love that moment where he comes out and he gives his speech. Man, I just want to run through walls in that moment. I just want to.
I'm gonna have to watch that again now that you say that. I'm gonna have to go back and watch that. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's so killer. The other one I would say is Shawshank Redemption. That's another one for me. And I think the commonality there is, once again, here's Andy Dufresne. He's just sitting there and he's got a vision. Nobody gets it. Nobody understands it. He's going to escape. And he did it. He did it ounce by ounce, digging out that wall. Sorry, spoiler alert. If you haven't seen it, he escapes.
Exactly. Yeah.
If you haven't seen Shawshank Redemption by now, I'm not spoiling it.
You missed it. Exactly.
But I love it because it just speaks to the human spirit.
Yeah.
And he's in a jail cell and figures out how to get free. And he took his time. It took patience, endurance, and a belief in something greater that he could do that. What more could you want? I love it.
Yeah. Oh, it's great. Great answer. Great answers. And then the last question is kind of a unique question, but what question haven't I asked you today?
What question haven't you asked me today?
That you wish I would have?
I don't know, Roger. I mean, you do. I've watched a number of these podcasts that you've done. You've done such a phenomenal job today. Phenomenal job on all of them. I don't know that there is a question apart from what my favorite food is. Maybe that would be one of them. What is my favorite food?
All right. What's your favorite food?
Tacos. I mean, that should be the number one answer for everybody.
Of course. That's the only answer, right? Yeah.
Steak and tacos, any kind of that combination. The only question I would say that you didn't ask me today that I would love to be able to have a shot to answer is how I could serve you, how I could serve you today on this podcast in a better way. That's the only thing that you didn't ask me that I wish you would have asked me. But I don't know, maybe that's too deep of a question, but I wish, because I love getting that answer. I love getting that question. How can, that's a question I should have asked rather. How can I have served you better?
I'll tell you what, you already have. Just the way you unselfishly shared and went deep on so many topics. You already have. So you've over-delivered on that, my friend. Over-delivered. Yeah.
I appreciate that.
So where can the listeners find you? Where can they? And we'll put this in the show notes, of course, when the episode goes to print or whatever. Where can they find you?
Yeah, honestly, we're doing a rebrand of all of our socials right now. So our socials are not a place to jump on and find us. Okay. The best place to find me, and Black Label is really more of a relational one-to-one. We scare off artists and musicians. When we start to market things, they get marketed to all the time. There's a lack of trust in that industry, so it's more relational. But I would still say the best way to find me, straightforward, is just through my LinkedIn bio, through my LinkedIn page right there. That one doesn't have to flex too much and start rebranding. We're not rebranding on LinkedIn. But I would say we're gearing up for this book release in the fall. And so we'll have a full rebrand and a full relaunch of our socials probably by September. And it's just Wolf&Iron and Wolf&Iron Black Label. But the best way to catch up with me is either to email me at wolf&iron.company at good old gmail.com.
Yep.
Or to find me under Travis Davenport on my LinkedIn page.
Cool. And we'll put that in, we'll put both in the show notes. Brother, what a great hour with you. I appreciate it. I feel better off for having spent this time. So thank you so much for being generous with your information and with your story.
No, Roger, the privilege is mine. Thanks for the honor of being on your show today.
You betcha. Take care. Thank you so much for tuning into the ThriveMore podcast. Don't forget to take a look at the show notes for any resources mentioned during the show. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you have access to the latest and the greatest. I'd also like to remind you to check out our website, ThriveMoreBrands.com. There you'll find information on the brands we support and information on franchising. Thank you again for tuning in. And until next time, always remember to set your intentions for the day and strive to thrive.